Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and it's great to be back in our London studio after 5 months with studio guests and not doing this from home via Zoom. And in today's programme we will be discussing home abortions and how over 600 medical professionals have asked for the government to reverse their policy on home abortion. So in this programme today, I'm joined by Christian Hacking from an organisation called Centre for Bioethical Reform, together with Maureen Martin, who is the president of the Christian People's Alliance. So welcome to the programme, and particularly this programme. After 5 months, we're back in our studio, so thank you for being my guests. Maureen, you've got something to share with us in terms of the Christian People's Alliance standing in the local London Assembly elections and the mayoral elections, and you won a fair number of votes, didn't you? So share with us how that went.
We did. We got 28,878 to be exact, which is an increase in our previous performance, which is always important to increase. So we're really happy with the fact we actually increased our performance from the last mayoral elections in 2016, I believe. And we're looking forward. We didn't get a seat on the Assembly, needed 100,000 votes for that. But we're really happy with our performance, and we're looking in next year with the London local borough elections to really improve our performance there. We do need about 500 candidates to stand to cover London, but that's fine. We are working on a recruitment programme, but what we're really looking at is 2024, where we're going to come out the gates really with a serious challenge to get on the London Assembly. And we really believe we can do it with 100,000 votes. Shouldn't be an immense challenge if we get the Christian community behind us. And that's what we aim to do. So we're really looking forward to 2024. Excellent. That's going to be our year, Simon. It's going to be our year.
Got another 3 years for that one.
Yes.
And Christian, it's great to have you on the programme, and well done for making your debut on this programme. Can you tell us about the organisation that you represent, called the Centre for Bioethical Reform? Sounds very scientific.
Sure, it does. Yeah, so it's called CBR UK. That's the Centre for Bioethical Reform UK. And we exist basically to teach on the humanity and value of unborn children, and also the reality of abortion. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do on-the-street displays showing people what unborn babies look like and what abortion looks like. We also interview people. We do stuff with students. We've got a programme for schools. And we take all of our understanding of what we do from a careful examination of social reform history, which is you can't end an injustice by covering it up. And indeed, what you have to do is you have to change not just how people vote, but you have to change the way that people think and feel about an issue in order to create the change to see it abolished.
Absolutely. And of course, ever since we went down into the first lockdown a year ago, we see that the government introduced something known as pills by post, or home abortion kits, where shockingly a pregnant woman can take 2 pills, and that would just effectively mean abortion is carried out. Very cynical, very cold, and also very dangerous on behalf of the government. What are your thoughts on the government introducing this home abortion kits, or as it's called, DIY abortions?
Well, it's horrendous, Simon. There's no doubt about it. Let's get one thing established, first of all. There's no such thing as a safe abortion. If there's one person that comes out of abortion that is not safe, and that's the baby. An abortion's end is always to end the life of a child. There's no such thing as a safe abortion. But with the DIY abortions, now the mother's life is now potentially put in jeopardy. Because if there's a problem, there's no professional help there for her. And they're quite horrendous. You take one pill to actually dissolve the baby effectively. The other one is to, remove it from the body. It's a terrible, horrendous experience. Not only for the mother, but also for those around her. If something goes wrong, there's no medical professional to assist. So potentially you have 2 lives in danger now. There's the child and there's also the mother. So it's a double jeopardy.
And Christian, from your perspective, why do you think our Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, decided during the start of the global pandemic and the first national lockdown that we all went through of March 2020 to introduce this DIY abortions, or pills by post?
Well, in order to answer that question, I've actually got to take you back a bit further to,
please do.
to 2018, 27th of December, that quiet period between Christmas and New Year, Matt Hancock had just started as the Health Secretary, and that was when he first approved of measures allowing women to take the second pill at home. So Maureen's quite right. The first pill is called mifepristone, and it's designed to cut off the nutrients to the baby, to kill the child. And the second pill, misoprostol, basically creates an early birth. It induces contractions so that you eject the child. The second pill was actually designed for stomach ulcers, not to induce abortions. And if you read the original description on it, it says, don't take this if you are pregnant. So what we saw as soon as Matt Hancock came in was a heeding and a capitulating to the pressure from the abortion industry that are very integrated within of UK politics, and a concession just to say, well, it's better that women eject their baby at home in the comfort of their own home than have to have that done in a clinic. And so that's what Matt Hancock did, and it showed his commitment right from the start of being a health secretary. Shows either he doesn't think the unborn child is a human being worthy of our protection as a state, or he does, but he just gives in to pressure. I don't know. I haven't had a conversation with him about it personally. And then we saw the same thing in lockdown. Really remarkably, I think it was on the 26th of March, right, as the pandemic was coming in, as we're hearing more and more news reports, Matt Hancock said in the Houses of Parliament, he said, we have no proposals to change any abortion law measures, as any abortion laws, I think, or any abortion rules as part of the COVID-19 response, okay? Then there was an influx of pressure from civil servants, a woman named Andrea Duncan. She's on the phone to the abortion providers. A bunch of signed letters were sent in by the abortion industries, and 6 days later, on the 30th of March, he approved these measures, with the full approval of the Civil Service and Health Minister Helen Whatley. So it just goes to show, and the irony of this measure is just huge, right? Because the reason why these measures were brought in were because we were being told to stay at home, protect the NHS, and save lives, right? And these measures simultaneously, okay, they not only take lives, in every safe abortion procedure, there is a fatal victim, they also put pressure on women, so complication rates, 1 in, I think it's 2 women in 100 will have an incomplete abortion, so where the whole baby won't be ejected or parts of the placenta left behind. If it goes beyond 10 weeks, it's 7 women in 100 will have that complication, okay? Which means that, ironically, throughout the whole of the lockdown period, whilst we've been told to stay at home and protect the NHS, about 500 women a month are going into hospital with complications from medical abortions. 250 women a month are needing surgical follow-up to remove the remains of the child or remains of the placenta or pregnancy left inside the woman. And I heard of one story of a woman called Kirsty. She took these pills, right? There were problems. It was an incomplete abortion. Her body went into an infection mode, so high temperature, because there were foreign tissue decomposing inside of her. She goes to the abortion clinic as instructed to say, can you help me? They check her temperature, high temperature, they think this could be a COVID risk, and they send her home, right? So it's totally running at odds with the whole supposed COVID strategy, and it shows, on the one hand, we're trying to save lives. On the other hand, we're permitting the killing of what now the figures would be over 100,000 women in the UK have taken these pills without any medical assistance over the lockdown. And the full implications of that, we just don't, I shudder to think of the impact that this has had, not only on the woman's health, but on people's mental health, and also just on the very concept of what a home is. One DIY abortion survivor, the same one I mentioned, called Kirsty, she said this, and this is a quote: "My home used to be my happy, safe place, and now it's the place that took the life of my child." So all abortion is wrong. The taking of innocent life is always wrong. But what we've seen in these measures is a perversion of who's doing the killing, and also a kind of eroding of what a home really is, which is a home is meant to be a place where children are protected, nurtured and loved. And yet now the home is being a place where they're being killed using these poisonous pills. So, yeah, I mean, this is dire indeed.
Paint a very grave picture, but a very alarming picture that you all need to know about. Maureen, we're living in a society in the West that we have moved so far away from our Judeo-Christian heritage. We are moved so far away from God's laws and his statutes that once made this great nation great. And now there's a complete moral equivalence. So, for example, if a woman wants to keep a baby, it's called a baby. Or the complications of birth, it's called a baby. But if she doesn't want it, it's called a fetus. How can anyone make that moral equivalence, depending on whether you want to keep the baby or not? And how does that then fit into the thinking of the likes of Matt Hancock, our health secretary, when it comes to these issues?
Simon, it's the language of the abortion industry. They dehumanise a baby to be able to justify killing it. It's like when the Nazis dehumanised Jews during the Nazi occupation of Europe and Germany. They dehumanize them to make it okay to kill them. The same is happening here with babies. When a woman gets pregnant, she calls it a baby. We don't say, how's your fetus? We say, how is your baby? The abortion industry has language specifically designed to dehumanize a baby and call it a fetus. It's not a baby anymore, it's a bunch of cells, so it's okay to kill it. So this is all misinformation to deceive young women or women generally into thinking you're not really killing a baby, it's a bunch of cells. And in fact, there's a story of a young lady in the States, I believe she had 9 abortions. She was treating abortion as a form of birth control, basically. She'd had 9 abortions, Simon. And this one particular time, she said, I'd like to see the remains. They don't normally do that in abortion clinic because they know the impact that can have. But they decided to, this time they let her see the remains. They had to piece this child back together because it was in pieces. So they did that. And the young lady screamed and said, what have I done? And ran out. Why? Because she realised this was a human being she had killed and she'd done it 9 times. And they never saw her again. This is how they managed to convince people, Simon, that you're not really killing a baby, it's a bunch of cells. This is the language they use. So for us, it's always a baby. For a Christian, it's a baby. From conception, it's a life. Okay, it's precious, it needs to be protected.
And it goes against science as well.
Absolutely.
And reason and logic and everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a very, very tough issue, and it's obviously extremely emotive and raises a lot of passions. But Christian, the fact that over 600 medics have now demanded an end to what is known as pills in the post must be a good sign, isn't it? Particularly for the ministry and the work that you're doing.
It is a good sign. Whether it will be enough to persuade policymakers, I'm not convinced. Simply because these measures are so ideologically driven and they're so charged with euphemisms and deceitful language that there's a large possibility that policymakers will just exclude such letters and listen to the institutions that fundamentally support abortion. And so what we've seen in the last year is what I would call a 180-degree assessment. So one side of the table, you've got the abortion industry, you've got their allies in the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, you've got the NICE, National Institute of Care Excellency, and then you've got members of the civil service. So what they've really been doing is that they write their own scientific papers, they cite each other's papers, and it's a one ginormous closed loop. And what they're ignoring is the 360-degree assessment of what about the victims of this? What about waste and sewage companies? And you make a very interesting point earlier. Maureen cited a very helpful story about this woman who had 8 abortions. And because what the abortion industry have done so successfully is they've separated the woman from the humanity of the child that she's killing. This is going to become harder and harder with these DIY home abortions because actually the interface with women and their child is going to become much more clear. If you order one of these pills by post packages, which you can, and your local NHS will be charged for it, you'll see that in the instructions it asks you to remove the pregnancy remains, to either flush them down the toilet or to put them in a plastic bag and dispose of them in your domestic waste. I mean, this raises huge ethical questions of, in what's meant to be a civilized society, of how we treat the dead. And it also means that, especially if women are having these pills on the 10-week cusp, or even beyond 10 weeks, we know many women and ah when they get these pills, they're not sure, they're waiting for their boyfriends to come through and say that they want to keep the baby. And we know that over 52 women have taken these pills beyond the 10-week cutoff in this time. One woman even took the pills at beyond 28 weeks, 4 weeks past the UK legal cutoff. You can see that headline if you Google it. What we're seeing is more and more women are actually going to be engaging with the brutal reality of what abortion is in the plain light of day. And so whilst these measures are being pushed ideologically, and whilst there's a high chance that the government won't listen to these 600 doctors, eventually the threshold of pain and suffering that these women are experiencing in the heart of their homes will eventually break through this kind of language cap that we've got going on. And even now, if you go onto Mumsnet and you search, pills by post-abortion, and you read some of the comments and you read some of the struggles of women going through this, you'll start to see the trauma that these things are doing. What we know is but the tip of the iceberg of the trauma and havoc this stuff is causing.
Maureen, you're in the kind of front line when it comes to politics in this country, and it seems that there are certain subjects that are considered politically incorrect that you can't raise as an issue. An issue of abortion is one of them, and arguments and discussions are closed down quickly, and there's almost a consensus amongst all the parliamentary parties in Westminster to not even discuss the issue of abortion. So maybe this whole issue of pills by post or DIY abortions may make some of our political representatives in Parliament think twice about the impact that abortions are having on not only on the mothers but also on the doctors and nurses have to work on these issues.
Absolutely, Simon. One of the reasons why it's not really openly discussed or as clear in their policies as they would like is because abortion is not popular with the general public. The SPUC recently has some stats, particularly in terms of DIY abortions. 71% of adults are concerned about DIY abortions. So that's 71%, that's the majority. It's not popular, Simon. So parties like the Conservative Party don't have a clear policy on it in their manifestos. They don't want to discuss it because they know it's not really popular. Other parties do have clear manifestos in their manifesto, like Labour Party and Liberals and Greens, but for the most part, they don't really talk about it because it's not very popular with the general public. It's popular with people in certain areas. Okay, the government's been lobbied by BPAS, it's been lobbied by Marie Stopes, by the Royal College of Gynaecologists and Obstetricians, and midwifery to continue these policies and make them permanent. Now, why would they be doing that? Is it money? It could be. They could be in bed with Big Pharma who are supplying these pills. They obviously have their motivations, but essentially it's not very popular with the general public, so they're not explicit about where they stand where abortion is concerned. And I think the DIY abortions are pushing it to the forefront because now it's in your face. Now, things are happening, women are being harmed, quite obviously harmed because of these DIY abortions. There's no support for them, and it's getting into the news, and the general public are hearing about it, and they've expressed concern. 71% is a high percentage of people to say we are concerned about DIY abortions.
And Christian, talk through us some of the moral issues and the moral maze regarding this one, because women should, the whole thing is about women having a choice. This is their own rights, and this is what the Liberals say anyway. That it's their body, they can do what they like with their body. And if they want to call it a fetus, it's a fetus. But if they want to call it a baby, they can call it a baby. So how much do a kind of process of kind of re-educating people, actually based on science, to remind people that this is a living organism, it is a baby, and the consequences of that are horrific. And if we take this on a kind of spiritual encounter, it's almost like the blood cries out, because we know from ancient Israel in the Old Testament, God's judgments placed on the sacrificing of children to Baal worship, for example, and how God sees this. So this is something that as Christians, all of us should be engaged in this battle to protect the sanctity of life, is it not?
Well, let me deal with the second part of your question first, and then I'll move on to the first part about the moral issue around this. I mean, from a Christian point of view, abortion is not only the taking of innocent human life, but it is child sacrifice, right? And any Christian who is on their knees praying for revival in this nation needs to realise that we can't have a revival whilst the church are quiet on this issue. That their blood quite literally does cry out from the ground, because these children are being flushed down the toilet and their remains are being end up, in our rivers and in our sewage systems and on our waste tips. I mean, this is you don't need to do any kind of hermeneutical gymnastics to apply that point. And this is so serious, because the scriptures are clear that when God talks about child sacrifice, he says, you are doing that which I did not even conceive of. It didn't even come into my head that, people would do that. No, even the most barbaric civilizations, from ancient history, like the Spartans, they didn't kill their healthy children. There's been awful practices of leaving out disabled children and other things, but for society to kill healthy children because they were happening at a bad time or through financial pressures, I mean, on the scale that is happening, it's unheard of. So this is a huge issue that the church needs to address, and anyone keen in evangelism or wanting to see, this country return to its Christian roots needs to hit this issue head on. And on that point, I segue onto this question of the moral issue, which is the best way to end abortion is simply to expose abortion, which is, and we say this all the time as an organisation, we say we don't protest abortion. We show people what abortion is, and abortion protests itself. And that's why at the start of lockdown, we started something called Hancock's Healthcare. It's a campaign, you can see it on the CBI UK website, and all it simply does is it shows people what DIY home abortion looks like, which is women all alone hemorrhaging. This is not a heavy period, but only this is an early delivery of a baby. And then it shows what that child looks like when it's delivered at, I think our picture is 8 weeks fertilization from 8 weeks gestation from fertilization. And where's that child going? Well, it's going into the sewers. That's the place of excrement. The subversion of humanity, the subversion of dignity in this is just massive. And then we have the question of, what happens next? And so we show people that, a subsect of these babies are going to be consumed by rodents in the sewage system. Others will be laid to waste on our rubbish dumps. So all you have to do in order to address these moral issues is show people the truth. And we don't agree with any kind of censorship, any attempt to infantilize society, to hide the facts from society. No, we lay the truth. It's a bit like the gospel. We renounce secret and shameful ways. We set forth the truth plainly, and we commend ourselves to every man and to every woman's conscience in this nation on the issue. And because when you do that, the argument's over. And that's why people want to cover up our images. That's why people want to bring in these buffer zones around abortion clinics, is because they know that the facts are stacked against them. They know that from the moment of conception, if you research it, you have a distinct, living and whole human being, a genetically unique entity. And once its humanity is established, then you're not. You're no longer in a place to decide whether it lives or dies. And so that's my in terms of dealing with the moral case, just go for the facts. Go for the facts and show people the facts and let the facts speak for themselves on this issue.
Absolutely. Down to less than 3 minutes. So if there's anyone watching, Maureen, that is thinking about having abortion or has had an abortion, there is forgiveness, isn't there, in the Lord Jesus Christ, and something that they shouldn't dwell on for maybe years over the life, even if it's like 2 or 3 decades ago. There is complete forgiveness, isn't there? We have to make this clear that women shouldn't hold on to that guilt because they are forgiven if they genuinely seek the Lord and seek his forgiveness.
Absolutely, Simon. Jesus died for everyone. He died to cover every sin, whatever the sin is, even abortion. So it's just a simple prayer of repentance. Say, Lord, forgive me, and the forgiveness is there. So, and you can move on with your life. The first step is always to give your life to the Lord and accept him as your Lord and Saviour. That's always the first step. And then after that, his arms are open. He'll forgive you of anything. There's nothing the blood of Jesus does not cover. That includes abortion.
Amen. And Christian as well, very much appreciate you coming today and just bringing your expertise, your research on this, such an important issue. And we know that God cares passionately about this issue. So therefore, as Christians, we should as well. Our viewers watching, how can they get involved with the work of your organisation and just make people aware of the dangers, not only the scientific, but the medical dangers of these awful DIY abortions?
Well, if you've been struck by what we've dealt with today, I really recommend you visit our website, www.cbruk.org, and follow the links to join the movement. What we're trying to do is we're trying to connect people together, we're trying to resource them and inspire them to do something for unborn children where they live, with the people around them, in an effective way that draws on effective principles of social reform history. So I recommend for people to go onto our website, to join the movement, and to check out our resources and to allow us to connect you with each other so that we can start being impactful, that we can make a case for life, and also reach out to help those mothers who've been through an abortion who need forgiveness and they need healing. And we've got a bunch of resources, including one called Post-Abortive Support for Everyone, run by a post-abortive woman called Pauline, to help women on that healing journey. What I do know, and this will be my final note, is the wound cannot heal if it's closed by a Band-Aid, and this is what Martin Luther King Jr. said. He says we have to rip off the Band-Aid to allow the wound to heal in the air of public opinion. And so that's what we've got to do on the abortion issue.
Christian and Maureen, thank you so much for being my guests on Politics Today. And I want to thank you for watching this programme today, because there can be no doubt that the issue of abortion is something that is close to the Lord's heart. And we know that there is a spiritual curse from God when the blood of the innocents cries out in our land. And if we're going to see a change in the spiritual heart of our nation, then we need to stand up against abortion. So thank you for watching this studio edition of Politics Today.